They told me I wasn't there to enjoy myself. I was there to help with the baby. So I handed the baby back to his father, picked up my bag, and walked off the ship into the heat of Cozumel. No drama, no scene, no words, I just walked. They didn't notice right away. My son-in-law was still talking to the couple from Deck 7, laughing at his own joke. My daughter was fixing her hair in a compact mirror she'd been carrying since Miami. My grandson had already forgotten I'd set him down. He's 3. He forgets fast. I wish I could. I want to tell you how it started. Because it didn't start at that dock in Mexico. It started the way these things always do. With a phone call that sounded like love. My daughter called in late February, and her voice had that particular warmth she only uses when she wants something, but hasn't decided to ask for it yet. Mom, we're booking a cruise, 7 days Caribbean, all-inclusive. We want you to come. I was standing in my kitchen, still in my robe, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Outside, the yard was brown and frostbitten, and I hadn't been anywhere interesting in 3 years. Not since my husband passed. A cruise, I said. You've never been on one, you always said you wanted to. That was true. I had said that once, standing in front of a travel agency window in 1987 with my husband beside me. He'd laughed and said maybe someday. Someday never came. You actually want me there? I asked. Of course, she said. It's a family trip, your family. I should have heard what was underneath that sentence. Your family. Not we miss you, Mom. Not we want to spend real time with you. Just, your family, so this includes you, technically. But I was 64 years old and lonely in a house that had been silent for 3 years, and I wanted to believe her, so I said yes. My son-in-law booked the tickets. He chose my cabin, a small interior room on Deck 4, no window. He and my daughter had a balcony suite, 2 floors up. It was the only thing in your price range, he said, which was interesting, because no one had discussed my price range. I'd offered to pay my share, and somehow my shares became the smallest room on the ship. I bought new clothes anyway, a sundress I'd been too self-conscious to wear for years, a wide-brimmed hat I'd seen in a window and thought, why not? I packed light the way I always do. I didn't want to be a burden. That phrase, I didn't want to be a burden, has governed my life in ways I'm only now beginning to understand. We met at the port in Miami on a Sunday morning in March. The air was already heavy and salt-sweet. My daughter hugged me the way you hug someone at a funeral. Quick, obligatory, already thinking of the next thing. My son-in-law shook my hand. My grandson was strapped into a stroller and screaming about a cracker. Can you take him while we check the bags? My daughter asked, already handing me the stroller handle. I took it. Of course I did. He was my grandson, and he was beautiful, even screaming. That first night, I ate dinner at the family table. My son-in-law talked about a podcast. My daughter talked about a woman at her office who had done something worth complaining about. My grandson threw a bread roll. I laughed, and no one laughed with me. After dinner, they said they were going to the adults-only lounge. Can you put him down for us? You know his routine. I didn't know his routine. I hadn't lived near them in 4 years. But I nodded and took him back to their cabin, read him 2 stories he was too tired to hear, and sat in the dark beside his travel cot until his breathing slowed. I got back to my own cabin at 9:15 and ate a granola bar I'd packed from home. Day 2 was worse, only because I had expected it to be better. We docked at Nassau, and my daughter had planned excursions, a private beach, lunch at a restaurant with a wait list, a sunset sailboat. I'd looked at the photos on the cruise app the night before, already thinking about which hat to wear. We're thinking you could hang back with him today, my son-in-law said at breakfast. He's too little for the sailboat. You don't want to be out in that sun anyway. I looked at my daughter. She was looking at her phone. I was looking forward to the beach, I said. It came out quieter than I meant it to. The ship has a pool area, my son-in-law said, already standing. He loves the shallow end. They left at 10. I spent the day in the pool area with my grandson, who was delightful and exhausting and 3 years old. He liked to pour water from one cup into another, over and over, with great scientific seriousness. Around noon, I got him lunch from the buffet, and we shared a plate of watermelon in the shade. He reached up and patted my face with his wet hand and said, "Gamma." That was the best part of the whole trip. That afternoon, while he napped on the narrow bed in my windowless cabin, I checked my daughter's Instagram. 6 photos from the private beach, my son-in-law with a drink in each hand, my daughter in a white cover-up, laughing the way I hadn't seen her laugh at dinner, genuinely, without thinking about it. A selfie on the sailboat at sunset, his arm around her, the water going orange behind them. She'd captioned it, "Perfect day with my 2 favorites." 2 favorites. I set the phone face down on the bedspread and lay in the dark, listening to my grandson breathe. He sounded like someone at peace with the world. I tried to borrow some of that. On day 3, I decided I wouldn't wait to be included. I would show up and participate, the way an actual guest on an actual family vacation would. I got up early, put on my sundress and my hat, and went to the breakfast buffet before anyone else was awake. I ordered eggs. I drank 2 cups of good coffee. I watched the ocean through the wide dining room windows, flat and green and enormous, and thought, I am on a cruise in the Caribbean. This is something. My daughter found me at 8:30, my grandson on her hip, looking tired and vaguely impatient. "Oh, you're already up. Good. Can you take him while I go to the spa? I have a 9 o'clock. I'd paid for her spa appointment. She'd mentioned it was expensive and trailed off in that particular way, and I'd heard myself offer. By day 3, I had paid for things I couldn't recall agreeing to pay for. I kept a small notebook, not to hold it over her, just to keep track. I took my grandson. I always took my grandson. That afternoon, I did something I almost never do. I said something. My son-in-law was on the balcony of their cabin, 1 level above where I stood on the deck. I called up to him. "I'd like to join you all tomorrow for whatever excursion you have planned." He looked down at me, not unkindly, the way you look at a piece of furniture that's in a slightly inconvenient spot. "Sure," he said. "We just assumed you liked having time with him." "I love having time with him," I said. "I'd also like time with the rest of you." "Sure," he said again, and went back to his phone. At dinner that night, they talked around me the way a river flows around a stone. Not with malice, just the natural pull of current. My son-in-law, 3 glasses of wine in, was telling the couple at the next table about the trip. They were from Ohio. Friendly people, the kind who smile easily and mean it. "Best travel decision we ever made," my son-in-law said, leaning back in his chair. "Bringing her along." He jerked his thumb toward me. "She's basically a full-time nanny for the week. Built right in. Don't have to pay for a single thing." The Ohio couple laughed politely. My daughter was cutting a piece of bread very precisely, watching her own hands. I sat very still. I've spent a lot of my life learning how to sit very still. How to wait for a moment to pass. How to hold my face in a pleasant expression so that whatever just happened doesn't become a scene. This time, I let myself feel it land. All of it. The word nanny. The phrase "don't have to pay." The easy laugh he gave it like he'd told a clever joke. And my daughter's silence, which was its own kind of answer. The woman from Ohio caught my eye for just a second. I couldn't read what was in her face. Something between sympathy and recognition. I folded my napkin. I picked up my purse from the back of my chair. I said quietly, "Excuse me," and I walked away from the table. Not dramatically, not with tears or a speech. I just stood up and left the way I should have left on day 1. I went to my cabin and didn't sleep. I lay on the narrow bed and thought about who I had been for 64 years. A person who folded her napkin before leaving. A person who said "excuse me" when she was the one being dismissed. A person who carried things, not just bags, but decades of small humiliations wrapped in good intentions. I thought about my husband, and how he used to say I had more patience than anyone he'd ever known, and how he'd meant it as a compliment, and how it wasn't. The ship was scheduled to dock in Cozumel the following morning at 8. I got up at 6:30, showered, dressed, packed my important things into the bag I carry across my body. My passport, my wallet, my phone, my blood pressure medication, a small photograph of my husband I've carried since he died. I have kept my passport in that bag since 1994, when I took my first trip abroad alone, and a well-traveled woman on the flight told me, "Always keep it on your body." Best advice anyone ever gave me. My daughter knocked at 7:45. "We're heading off at 8. Can you get him into his swim stuff? We found a beach thing." I dressed my grandson in his swim shirt and his little water shoes. He kept trying to eat the Velcro straps. I let him for a minute because he was 3 and it made him happy, and I wasn't sure how many more mornings I'd spend like this. We walked off the ship together, my daughter and my son-in-law slightly ahead. My grandson in my arms because the gangway was steep, and he didn't like it. The air in Cozumel smelled of salt and something floral I couldn't name. The port was busy. Vendors, taxis, tourists with maps, a little row of colorful shops with their doors propped open. My son-in-law was on his phone, arranging a cab. My daughter was asking him something about a catamaran. My grandson squirmed to get down, and I set him on the dock and held his hand, and he immediately tried to crouch and pick up a pebble from the ground. Then my son-in-law said it, not to me, to the taxi driver he was negotiating with. Loud, casual, the way people talk when they've forgotten you're standing there. Yeah, we brought her along for the week. She watches him the whole time, frees us up to actually enjoy ourselves, you know? He laughed. The driver smiled back. My daughter scrolled through something on her phone. I looked down at my grandson. He'd found his pebble. He was turning it over in his fingers with great satisfaction. I let go of his hand. I walked to where my son-in-law stood and placed my grandson's small hand into his father's free hand. My son-in-law looked up confused. He likes to be carried on uneven ground, I said. His left shoe runs a little loose. Keep an eye on it. Then I picked up my bag, settled the strap across my chest, and walked in the other direction. I didn't look back. If I'd looked back, I might have talked myself out of it, and I had been talking myself out of things for 40 years. The port was bigger than I'd expected. I walked past the souvenir stalls, past a woman selling mangoes sliced into flowers, past a row of mopeds for rent. My heart was going fast, but my feet were steady. I had my passport. I had my card. I had the $400 in cash I've kept folded in my wallet since before my daughter was born. Old habit. Women of a certain generation kept emergency money because we understood, at some level, that emergencies come. There was a small cafe set back from the waterfront. Plastic chairs, a chalk menu on the wall, a ceiling fan turning slow overhead. I sat at a table near the window. A young woman came over and I ordered coffee and eggs in the best Spanish I could manage, which isn't much but was apparently enough. I sat there for a long time. The coffee was strong. The eggs came with rice, which surprised me and then seemed exactly right. I ate every bite. I watched the street. A dog lying in the shade, 2 old men playing cards at a cafe across the way, a child chasing a pigeon with tremendous dedication and no success. My phone buzzed. My daughter. The cab is waiting. I turned the phone over and finished my coffee. She called twice more before I shut the phone off entirely. I asked the young woman if she knew of any place nearby to stay, not a resort, something small and quiet. She thought for a moment, then wrote an address on a napkin. Her aunt rented a few rooms, she said. Clean, not far. It cost me $12 in a taxi and one exchange of sign language and broken Spanish to get there. The house was painted the yellow of old butter, with a small courtyard crowded with plants I didn't know the names of and a hammock strung between 2 trees. The woman who answered was somewhere around my age. Silver hair pulled back, expression that needed no translation. I told her I needed a room for 2 nights, maybe 3. She showed me a room with pale blue walls, a wooden bed, a window overlooking the courtyard, clean sheets, a small fan, $110 a night. I paid for 3 nights in cash. I slept for 4 hours in the middle of the day, with the fan running and the window cracked open. When I woke up, I didn't know where I was for a moment. And then I did, and it was one of the better moments I'd had in years. I turned my phone on that evening. 42 missed calls between my daughter and my son-in-law. A text from my daughter. This is not okay. We're worried. The ship leaves tonight. I knew the ship's schedule. I had looked it up before I walked away. I'd booked a flight home from Cozumel International Airport. 2 days out, direct to Atlanta, connection home. I paid the change fee without blinking. $340. I had spent more than that keeping my daughter's water running when they were short on money, and too proud to say so directly. That night, I sat in the courtyard hammock while the light faded over the rooftops. The woman who owned the house brought me a cold glass of something without being asked, set it on the little table beside me, and went back inside. No conversation required. I didn't know her name. She didn't know mine. And for those 2 hours in the quiet of that courtyard, that was exactly what I needed. I thought about everything I had paid for without being thanked. I thought about every hour spent holding my grandson while his parents went and enjoyed themselves. And how I loved him, truly loved him, and how that love had been used as a convenience. I thought about the word nanny said to a taxi driver by my own son-in-law, and I thought, no more. Not a dramatic decision, no music behind it. Just a quiet, practical no more, the kind that settles into your chest and stays. The next morning, I found a business center at a hotel nearby and called my bank. I removed my daughter's secondary access to my savings account, the one I'd added her name to 3 years ago, just in case. Then I called my attorney's office and left a message. I wanted to look at my will. When he called back, I told him what I wanted. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I'd like to change the beneficiaries, I said. My sister in Vermont and her daughters. And your daughter? He asked. She'll be fine, I said. He didn't argue. That's why I've kept him 20 years. I flew home on a Tuesday. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. My house felt the same way it always does when you've been away, and something has shifted in you. Familiar and slightly foreign at once. I walked through each room, the photo of my daughter on the mantle, taken at her wedding, her face wide open and happy. A drawing my grandson had made last Christmas, indecipherable purple loops he'd called a dragon. I kept the drawing. I wrapped the wedding photo carefully in tissue paper and put it in the guest room closet. Not to erase her, just to stop performing grief at her altar. I called a realtor that week. She came Thursday, walked through with a clipboard, said she thought I could get a good price. What are you looking for instead? She asked. Something smaller, I said. Good light, quiet. She found me an apartment in a neighborhood I'd always liked but never lived in. Second floor, 2 bedrooms, a bay window in the kitchen that caught the morning sun. I signed the lease on a Friday, moved in the following Saturday with a rented van and my neighbor's help and no ceremony at all. I left behind everything that felt like it belonged to the old version of this life. The formal dining set no one had ever actually used. The guest room furniture bought for visits that were too infrequent and too strained. My daughter's old soccer trophies that had been in my attic for years without anyone asking after them. I didn't throw them out. I drove them to her house and left them on the porch with a note. Thought you might want these, Mom. She came to find me 8 days after I got home. I don't know how she tracked down the new address. My best guess is the neighbor who helped me move. People mean well. She knocked twice. I opened the door. She had the look of someone who is ashamed but hasn't decided yet if she's going to say so. Dark circles, hair pulled back without any product, the way she wore it when she was young and too rushed to care about appearances. Mom, she said. I stepped back to let her in. She sat at my kitchen table, the one I'd bought secondhand, the bay window behind her. She looked around the apartment the way people look at something they expected to be sadder. You moved, she said. I did. Without telling me. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. We were scared, on the ship. We didn't know where you were. I know. You could have just said something, if you were unhappy. I did say something, I said. I told your husband I wanted to join you on the excursions. I told you I'd been looking forward to the beach. I said it clearly, and it didn't change anything. She looked down at her hands. He shouldn't have said what he said, the nanny thing. No, he shouldn't have. He knows that. I don't need him to know it, I said. I'm not asking for an apology from him. I'm telling you what happened and why I left. A different kind of quiet settled between us. I let it happen, she said finally. I know I did. I hadn't expected that. It sat in the room for a moment. Yes, I said, you did. I got used to it. You always just handled things and I let you. And eventually I stopped seeing it because it was easier not to. I looked at my daughter. She was 41 years old and she looked, right then, like she was 12. Sitting in my kitchen after a hard day, not quite able to say what hurt. I love you, I said, and I'm not going to be available the way I was. Not for trips that aren't really for me, not to carry what isn't mine to carry. That's done. She nodded. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't cry, and I was glad. Crying would have made it about comfort, and I wasn't ready to comfort her. Not yet. I still want to see my grandson, I said, on my terms, when it's a real visit. Of course, she said quietly. She left 20 minutes later. No hug, we weren't there yet, but at the door she stopped and said, "I'm glad you're okay," and I believed her. It was enough. Just barely, but enough. The weeks after that were the quietest I'd had in a long time, and I mean that in the best way. I unpacked, slowly. I arranged my books by color, which is frivolous and pleasing and entirely my own decision. I found the sundress I'd bought for the cruise and wore it to the farmer's market on a Saturday morning. It fit well, the sun was warm. No one told me otherwise, and no one needed to. I started walking mornings before the heat came. My neighborhood has good sidewalks and an old cemetery 2 blocks over that you're allowed to walk through. Shaded, still, the kind of quiet you can actually hear. I went there often, not morbidly, just because I like being near things that have lasted. My grandson calls on video Sunday afternoons. My daughter holds the phone. He presses his face too close to the camera and tells me things I can only partly understand. Last Sunday, he showed me a rock. Gray, small, completely ordinary. "Gamma, look," he said. "It's a dragon egg." "I can see that," I said. He held it closer to the camera. "You can have it if you want." "I'll take very good care of it," I said. My daughter behind him smiled, small and careful but real. That's where we are. It isn't forgiveness exactly, and it isn't what we had before, because what we had before wasn't as good as I pretended. But it's honest, and honest is something I can work with. I am 64 years old. I live in a bright apartment with a bay window and books arranged by color, and a firm agreement with myself that I will not apologize for taking up space. I walked off a cruise ship in Cozumel with my passport and my emergency cash, and a clean, quiet certainty that I was done, and I started over in the most ordinary way possible. They said I was there to help, not to enjoy myself. They were wrong. I am here. I have always been here, to rest, to be seen, to matter. If you're listening and something in this sounds familiar, you don't have to perform gratitude for people who treat your presence as a resource. You don't have to keep saying yes when every yes costs something you can't get back. You are allowed to place your grandson's hand gently into his father's. Pick up your bag and walk the other way. And if this story found you, if you've been the one carrying bags that weren't yours, smiling at a table where no one thinks to look at you, share it. Leave a comment. Let someone else know they're not alone in it, because I spent too long thinking I was the only one keeping count. I wasn't, and neither are you.